What it do, everyone? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and I'm back temporarily. I've currently hooked up the old computer again. I couldn't go without it, and I needed to get back in the game. And that's not what this video is about, though. Anyway, so what this video is about is I want to take a little bit of time to talk about when you look at games that have very strong narrative and very strong storytelling, not just mechanics, but yes, storytelling mechanics, as well as storytelling devices and plot devices, and just the way they tell them. Obviously, Shenmue and Shenmue 2, just the Shenmue series in general, have always been up the top of just their types of storytelling and the way they tell the story. They, when you want to just say factor it in, it even comes in close with a little bit of the whole real life simulator that the term just gets thrown around and coined around a little bit with with the when it comes to Shenmue 1 and 2. I personally I don't think the way people say it, I don't think it's actually an insult. I think it's just kind of a funny little nod towards it. But it's extremely effective. It's a very, very good way. It fits in perfectly with the story, the style of gameplay, and just everything in the game in general. And because of all of that, there's one specific point I want to talk about. Now, before I do get into that, I do realize that, yes, I'm using footage from Shenmue 1. This is the opening of Shenmue 1. I don't want to use the exact footage that I'm going to talk about in this game, or in this video, simply because I think it's kind of unjust, and it's one of the finest moments of storytelling and finest ways of storytelling that, even though I'm going to talk about it, if you haven't experienced it, I recommend you go and do before you watch this video, just saying. But that you can't properly grasp it and experience it without by just watching a video. You actually have to play through both games and live through it yourself to properly understand. But this video is mainly for the people who have done that and will know what I'm talking about. At least I just want to give my opinion on a different kind of storytelling and a different kind of plot device or plot mechanic, if you will, that has just been completely overlooked by many, many people, because most people will talk, it's like, oh, narrative driven story, Bioshock Infinite, which I personally don't agree with, narrative driven story, The Last of Us, which I do agree with, but you get the idea. Most people only bring up a handful of different games, and Shenmue is not usually one of these games. Sometimes it is, but in particular this individual part is not. So I've waxed on for about 3 minutes anyway about about what I'm going to talk about, but not actually saying what I'm going to talk about. So, what I am going to talk about is Disc 4 in Shenmue 2. So, as you probably would expect, there may be a little bit of spoilers. I'm going to try keep them down to a minimum. But as I said already, this video is mostly for people who really just don't care about Shenmue or the story or whatever, and they're just interested in a different plot device or a different type of storytelling, maybe from just an overarching point of view, not just specifically for Shenmue or games, just in general of the general area of storytelling. It's also for the people who have played Shenmue 2 and completed it, so they'll understand it as well. So, to get started, I'm going to try to keep this part as brief as possible, because otherwise I'll be here for weeks talking. So I'm going to get you up to where my process of thinking is, you do have to play through Shenmue 1 and 2 in their entirety to get to there, because it's disc 4 of, there's 4 discs in Shenmue 2, it's disc 4 of Shenmue 2. It's the entirety of disc 4. So it's basically, it's not exactly the last 25% of the game, because it is a bit short. It is considerably shorter than the rest of the game. So it's maybe the last 10 or 15%, but it is at the very end of the game. So to understand where I'm coming from, when you play Shenmue 1 and 2, it's a lifestyle experience kind of thing. It factors in all the daily, what some people would call mundane, but I don't agree with that. What some people would factor in as just all the basics, all the standard stuff, you know, the where I come from, the real life simulator, if you will, that I mentioned earlier. It factors in all of that, as well as all the story parts, the combat, the QTEs, the actual history, a lot of the optional stuff, as well as all the free roam and free will. So when you factor in all of that, okay, that's where I'm gonna leave that part of it. When you factor in all of that and the pace and the type of storytelling and the plot devices it's been using the entire time through the entirety of Shenmue 1 and through discs 1, 2, and 3 of Shenmue 2. When you get to Shenmue 4, here's where the spoilers come in, people, so turn off the video now if you don't want actual specific spoilers, but I am going to try to keep them to bare minimum. And I will stress this one last time, is you can't really properly experience this, in my opinion, until you actually go through it and you do it yourself with the entirety of the rest of the 2 games under your belt to properly understand it. So when you come to disc 4, the game changes pace, the game changes tone, the game just, I don't want to say slows right down, because that usually has a negative connotation. But even when you keep it in for the positive aspect, I don't feel like slowing down is still the right term to use for it. The game just shifts into an entirely different gear, but it's an absolute breath of fresh air. Not because the rest of the game is bad or the rest of the game is too fast paced or anything like that. It's so refreshing. When you come from Shenmue 1 and 2, the entirety of those games, and then you get to the end of, or almost the end of Shenmue 2, it's just such a breath of fresh air, and it just completely changes the pace. And it really, really strongly conveys, what I believe anyway, Yu Suzuki's image, and it just conveys what he wanted to get across as Shenmue, as an experience, as an expansive experience. Because we all know Shenmue was originally supposed to have 11 chapters spread across, I think it was 4 or 5 different games. So it's not just, Shenmue 1. Okay, Shenmue 1 was chapter 1. Shenmue 2 was chapters 2, 3, and 4. So you get the idea. It's each chapter is its own individual thing. And when you get to chapter 4, which is disc 4, it really just completely takes you away. And it's all the small things that have made Shenmue great that are put into effect with this large plot change and plot device as well. And it's just absolutely fantastic. It's completely breathtaking. I don't know why anyone hasn't talked about this in depth a lot more. When you think of all these games, all these narrative-driven games, and all these, what would you call them? All these articles and videos and all that are all made about specific games, or the top 5 narrative games and all. You never seem to find this particular scene in there. Or when people talk about plot devices or plot mechanics for these types of reasons, you never seem to see this in here. Now, sure, you do see some people talk about this. You do see some people including Shenmue 1 and 2 in the games like lists and games like this. But I just think this is one of the finest examples of immersion and expansive storytelling. And when I say one of, I mean it's up there. It's possibly the best straight away that I've ever played, and possibly the best shift of gear and plot mechanic that has ever been implemented in a game, and it's just been overwhelmingly enjoyable and overwhelmingly immersive. And not for a second did I think I was bored. Not for a second was I thinking of looking at my phone. Not for a second was I thinking of looking out the window or pausing it to get a drink or anything like that. I was completely hooked for the entirety of the disc. And that is a good thing. Now, I'm not saying it's a hard thing to do for me or anything like that. I'm not saying it's a hard thing to do for anyone else. But the fact is that it kept me so immersed in the actual game itself. And like I said, by comparison to the rest of the game, it's very different. So, it breaks it up a little bit. It does vary it up a small bit in there. Sometimes it's just a load of talking that you get to choose, and the backstory that you get from there, and what feels like an everyday real conversation of getting to know someone. Now, that will make sense for the people who have played the end of Shenmue 2. And they will probably agree with me that a lot of it feels organic, and it just feels natural. And because of that, it does what it's trying to do unbelievably effectively. And that's for many of the reasons I won't go into the whole. I won't go into all the spoilers and every single little individual plot point, but it does vary it up a little bit. Like I said, there are some minor QTEs. There's a minor bit of actual exploration. There's a minor bit of the Shenmue. What would you call it? The Shenmue walking around. Now, I won't say, when I say exploration, I do mean walking around and exploring. But I mean, there's the picking up, the looking, the curiosity that comes with the Shenmue games. It's all in this, and I think that while Shenmue 1 is one of the finest games I've ever played, and it's had such a massive influential effect on gaming in general ever since it came out 16 years ago, I've been saying that the whole time. And when you factor in that Shenmue 2 came out in 2001, and you look at the effect that that's had on it, this is possibly one of, if not the greatest implementation of a specific plot point and plot mechanic in possibly any game ever, in my opinion. And I just think it's absolutely phenomenal. And Yu Suzuki just knocked it out of the park with it. And I will admit this, it has completely drove up my expectations for Shenmue 3 a bit more. And that could be to my own downfall in the long run. We'll see. I have faith in Yu Suzuki to actually provide a good Shenmue 3 and a proper actual sequel. But all I can say is it does what it's trying to do perfectly. And because of that, you factor in what Yu Suzuki was trying to do, his vision for actually doing it, and I reckon that what we actually got in game was probably exactly what he wanted to do, and exactly how he wanted to do it, how he wanted it to look, how he wanted it to sound, how he wanted us to feel about it. And because of that as well, I'm going to throw in one last little piece in here as well, is that I made a video before about, there's two related videos to this before. One of them, I had a Shenmue retrospective a while back on why I just thought Shenmue was just so influential and why it was one of the greatest games ever made. I'll have it linked in the description below if you want to check it out. But at the same time, I did also make a different video. Well, I won't say at the same time, just when I say at the same time, you know what I mean. I made a different video talking about, from all the different games and series and all you've ever played, what would your top 3, say, games that have given you like emotional ties and emotional bonds to the characters? Shenmue was not on my list. After playing and completing, I won't say episode 4, disc 4, just completing Shenmue 1 and 2 straight through, I have to say Ryo Hazuki and Shenhua are now joint. They're somewhere on that list. That list is now in turmoil because Shenhua and Ryo Hazuki they're now on that list. I have to rejig it in my own mind to see how it goes, but it's just that effective and it's that well done that it's basically art, is all I can say. There's the whole concept of our video games art. I'm not going to get into that, but this is something special, is all I can say, and it's definitely worth checking out. Hopefully Sega will come out with those alleged HD remasters for Shenmue 1 and 2 that we've supposedly had finished for years but have just not been released because of timing and or the rumours of, what were the other ones, licensing issues. But we'll see how it goes. Shenmue 3 is currently slated for approximately December of 2017, so there's still over a year and a bit for Sega to actually get through and release them. I do hope that they do release these and that everyone can actually experience all this the way it was supposed to be done. If not, pick yourself up a Dreamcast, play through Shenmue 1 and 2. Pick yourself up an original Xbox, just play through Shenmue 2 if that's how you want. I'd recommend playing through both of them, to be honest, but you'll see what it is, especially in the upcoming continuation that is Shenmue 3 after all these years. So I'm going to leave it there anyway. Let me know if you've played it and your thoughts on a plot device, specifically this one, but not just limited to this one as well. Let me know on what some of your favorite ones are. If you've experienced the Shenmue 2 plot device in question, let me know what your thoughts on it were, what your thoughts were on disc 4, the change of tone, style, whatever. Put all of that in there. I'm definitely curious to hear about it, or possibly talk about it with someone. Let me know all that in the comment section below anyway. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter, details in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the rest of the videos in my channel.